Hey, Community Wise Podcast. It's Holly Long, your host. And this month um, is a great month. It's the month of October, and it's the month that lists Greater Kansas City turned 40. Well, we celebrated our 40th anniversary. So it's been a whirlwind of just time and celebration. And what better way to end a month of October of celebration other than talking about National Women's Small Business Month? And because it's such a special interest area of ours, we have invited our special guest, Miss Nia Richardson, who is the managing director of KC Biz Care. So, Nia, welcome to Community Wise
Thank
Podcast.
you for the torture. So happy to be here.
Ah, I love you for it. I love you forever for it. So, just a little bit of background about National Women's Small Business Month, and we'll talk about
Okay.
that. We'll talk about biz care. We'll talk about you, all in a 20-30 minute podcast. And our audience knows this is a free flowing conversation between you and
Okay.
I, and whatever. If we make detours around it, it doesn't even matter because all of the substance is good. We just want to provide a platform for our experts in the field, in which Miss Richardson, you are expert in the field, um, to come talk to us and to share what you know and how we can elevate community development in Kansas City. So, with that being said, October is known as National Women's Small Business Month. And this takes time to recognize the achievements of the country's female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And so, with that being said, I know entrepreneurialism, I don't know if I made that up or
You
not.
made that up, but it's okay.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur is in your
Yeah.
blood. Talk to us about your background, talk to us about your family, talk to us about who Nia Richardson is and how that all was the impetus to get you to be where you are now.
Wow. So there's a lot because there's so much that just happened this past weekend from me getting back into the country. So before I started working with the city, I worked for my dad and my mom's family business. My dad founded his business when I was about 5 years old. My father originally came to Kansas City to work for Burns and McDonald. Worked there for a couple of years, and he decided to start his own business, mostly because he was doing tutoring through the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center, where they were teaching math and reading and things like that. And he got challenged by one of the mentors there, him and a couple other folks. They were probably like younger than us when they were doing this work. And they were like, hey, you guys talk to these kids about, math and things like that and what they should do, but show them how to really apply it. So him and a couple of other folks had started the business. Um, Probably maybe a couple of years into it, it was probably just him left with the company. But after college, when I was actually getting a paycheck, I worked for my father for about 13 years before I kind of got recruited over to the city to help out with the KC BizCare office. But before coming to the city, I wasn't aware of KC BizCare. I wasn't really aware of all the things in the ecosystem. I was able to go back and see what things my father actually did do. Because 4747 Truce right now is kind of a hub for a lot of things: SourceLink, Score, the Innovation Center.
Mhm.
My father actually used to incubate there, and then he moved down to the corner on I believe is now Cleaver Boulevard, and had an office up top. And then he moved over into a building on 5737 Swell Parkway, where by the time I got out of college and came back, I started working for him there. So I watched the company evolve and grow. It was a civil and structural engineering company. He just recently retired. My mother's probably more rejoiced than he is. But he retired. Well, they both retired. They sold the company. And actually, this coming Wednesday, they're moving to Ghana, West Africa.
I heard. How
Yeah,
dope.
so I've been at all these different, going away events for them. I'm exhausted. I'm still on South Africa time.
Yeah.
Also, there was a ribbon cutting for the credit union that my father had been working on
Yes.
since the Funkhauser administration. Um, so
Yes.
it'd been years. That's been in development. They finally got that open, or they had the ribbon cutting. It's under construction and should be opening in December. So when you look at that and all these different things I was kind of brought up in, although I was not an entrepreneur myself, I was raised in an entrepreneurial family. So I got to get an aspect or different perspective. And I got to actually see a successful business continue to grow. And I got to actually see the purpose and the value of having a being a business owner in the community, and the value of staying in your community and creating opportunities, and just even being present for when young people walk by. A lot of people didn't know what we did in that building, and when we finally came outside and started talking to them, just looking at their eyes and realizing like, oh, there's an engineering company right in my neighborhood, made a big difference for the people we would see every day, people we would see going to the liquor store every day, or anytime we would talk to
Hmm.
folks. That's I got to really feel and see the impact of that. And so I carried a lot of that in the work. I do carry a lot of that in the work that I do now, and understanding that entrepreneurship is probably the not I mean, besides investments and things like that, it's probably the only way we're going to be able to solve the issue around the racial wealth gap, the pay
Yeah.
gap, all those different things.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're not going to pay me, I'm gonna pay myself. And you're seeing that shift, and the pandemic really put that to highlight of people kind of gravitating towards entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. So
Yeah.
it's been an interesting thing to kind of watch. And so worked for him for about 13 years, watched that through my family, and then came over to the city and was really tasked with, hey, we have this office, it's been around since 2009, and
Right.
it's evolved, and I don't think the city really knew what it had. And when I came in, I was like, you guys, what are we doing? Like, this is great. And I have yet, in I'm coming up on 4 years next month, I have yet to see any other city do what we're doing. And in fact, we've become the model for other cities to follow, to show how you really can begin to work with small businesses through the regulatory process. And so, for those who don't understand what BizCare is, so we're a free resource within the city, and we pretty much, primarily, we help people through the regulatory process. So, understanding what it takes to get an actual business license. Now, I'm a government, so I can't legally advise you on, hey, here's the proper structure for your business. You need an attorney for that. I can't tell you how to do your
Hmm.
books. There's a point where I stop, because you can't say the government told me I had to do this unless it was something that we require
Exactly.
you to do. And that's the regulatory process. But I can give you a
Yeah.
cheat sheet of how to get through that process. And so right now, I'm broadcasting live from my new office space inside of City Hall. And on the
Yeah.
other side of me, we are in the same space with the business license team. And so
Hmm.
we created that one stop shop. Typically people think, okay, I'm going to start a business, I need a business license, but don't really understand that you have to establish the business before you can license the business. So you got to have a kid, you got to get the kids his shots, then you can sign the kid up for school. And then that's where we kind of
Right.
come in to try to simplify that process for people, and then, introduce them into the ecosystem of resources that might be available to them in Kansas City, which are a lot.
So I think that's a really good point we should emphasize, right? Casey Bizcare is was put into place to help people who are specifically residents of Kansas City,
Well,
Missouri,
it well
right?
it's for anybody starting a business in Kansas City or wanting to do business in
Two
Kansas
bits.
City. So yeah, but
There we go.
primarily we do serve our citizens, and so I do get people who call from other cities, and I'm like, now on my off time we could talk about a fee, but the city of Texas or wherever doesn't pay me to do this, so you need to figure out what the resource
Right.
is there. But depending on the situation and what time I have available, I'm more than happy to help people understand, but then also let them
Yeah.
know, if you was in Kansas City, you wouldn't have this problem.
You wouldn't have this problem because we would be right there. And then
Right.
also, I want to emphasize is that um, BizCare is put into place not only for um, businesses owned by women, businesses owned by African Americans, our brown brothers and sisters, but everybody. And
Everybody.
I think that's super important to emphasize, even though this is National Small Women's Month, and we will get to that
Yeah.
subsection in a minute. But I think sometimes we work in, people don't realize how big the ecosystem could be, the potential of the ecosystem that you are sitting on and that you're
Mhm.
facilitating is. Can you talk to us a little bit about that perspective of being inclusive for all neighborhoods and all people and all the resources that are equally distributed, and then we could talk about a little more of what happened during COVID and PPE and all that kind
Oh
of stuff
yeah,
if you
I
want
got
to.
stuff for all of that. So I'm glad that you brought that up because we recently got funding through the Kauffman Foundation for inclusive ecosystem research. I am
Hmm.
particularly focused on the regulatory framework as it pertains to ecosystem building, meaning what role does a city play in the ecosystem? And we,
Hmm.
as an industry, we procure, we have government contracts, billions of dollars in government contracts. How do I leverage that to help small businesses grow in Kansas City? What policies need to be in place? People don't realize that policies really impact where you do business, that's zoning,
Yeah.
whether you can
Yeah.
sell liquor, that's regulated industries, whether you can sell food, that's health department. Those are all policies that are created by cities, by city officials, by and city administrators, and by the feds that we kind of follow. Whether the state says, whatever the Fed says, and it kind of trickles down to us to say this is how we guys, how we want you guys to regulate these different things. Those are very, very important. And so again, BizCare is a great resource for anybody. But by default, I can say, and I don't have the data on it yet, but since working in this office, majority of the people that I would see coming in asking for assistance are Black and brown. In fact, I was
Hmm.
so intentional that when I was able to actually hire for my office, I made sure that the next person that I hired was fluent in Spanish. And not just I take Spanish as a second language. Spanish should be your first
Right.
language. I need you to understand the cultural competency of our Hispanic based businesses or anybody who speaks Spanish. I didn't want someone just to translate. I wanted to someone to be able to relate. I wanted someone to be able to have some compassion and know how to walk people through this step. And when I say I've seen people in tears, when Samuel Morris will walk up and begin to speak Spanish to them and explain everything to them, because we would typically translate through children. And that gets a little hard
Right.
when it comes to certain words they can't
Hmm.
translate. And so I was very, very intentional in making sure that whoever we hired had those particular capabilities. In fact, the second person that we hired, now Spanish might be a second language that she learned, but it's a great backup for us to have if ever we needed to translate anything or to kind of support our businesses. So I was very, very intentional to make sure we had that support. In fact, we also are going to be focused on a lot of different initiatives. We have one with NLC we just signed up for to help with policies and things that impact Hispanic based businesses. We are going to have, through that grant, through Kauffman, we'll be launching a small business census so we can get data. There's a large gap or data deficiencies with our Black and brown businesses. So it's hard for me to really push strong policies or influence the policy makers about where they should be kind of leaning towards or what things they should be doing without that data. So we'll be doing that with the Kauffman grant. We'll be doing an ESO accelerator, entrepreneurial support organization accelerator, particularly focused on our BIPOC led organizations, our Black and brown or indigenous led organizations. So the leader, if the leader is BIPOC, we know that there is some intent starting there, and then we want to help them trickle it down into their programming and be able to support them, because it's not just the business owners that need support. Our organizations that support our entrepreneurs need a lot of support, and so does their leadership, especially those who are being intentional about supporting Black and brown entrepreneurs. So that is the way we can build an inclusive ecosystem, because it doesn't exist right now in Kansas City. Now Kansas City has a large and strong ecosystem. I think there were like, before the pandemic, there was probably over 400 organizations, according to KC SourceLink, that claim to support entrepreneurs. But when I got into my position, I had read, it was Linking Tree that did a report out of 50 major cities
Hmm.
that said that Kansas City was
Yes.
49 out of 50 cities. St. Louis is a little bit behind us at 50. So the state of
Right.
Missouri kind of sucked when it comes to supporting minority entrepreneurship. And so all those different things tell me, hey, we need to do more on this front. And again, being in the role that I'm in, being in a neutral ground, how do I build an ecosystem that supports that? And when I look at my peers that do something similar in other cities, they have no guide and really how to make that happen. So I'm hoping that, again, Kansas City can be at the forefront and be in the model and showing other cities how to really go about creating inclusive ecosystems for their businesses.
Oh, wow. Ooh,
I get
that's a lot.
it.
You do. And then this is how we're going to become the city of entrepreneurs,
Oh,
right?
so much so.
I love
So
this.
much. There's so many elements or initiatives that are actually getting ready to come up that we've been working on quietly that is going to help Kansas City be that city of entrepreneurs. I mean, we're so close. It's just that we really got to fill this, which people might think is small, but it's a huge gap for our businesses to be able to excel.
Wow, wow. So, okay, let's parlay into the lack of access to capital
Okay.
that some of our businesses are experiencing, particularly those that are women-led, black and brown-led, things of that nature.
Mhm.
Um, because you are at an ecosystem or you are helping foster an ecosystem of inclusivity, how can we bridge those gaps together and in helping particularly women, since this is National Women's Small Business Month,
Yeah.
how can we help those women in those areas have access to capital? What are those top 10 resources that are available to, yes, women in business, but anybody?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're applicable to
Oh
everybody,
yeah.
right? Do you mind speaking up to us about that?
Yeah. So I can speak on a couple of programs that I was a part of during the pandemic. One was actually with lists. So through my
Yeah.
service through the Central City Sales Tax Board, I pushed for
Yes.
the $500,000 to go to small businesses within the Central City Sales Tax. We partnered with lists to disperse that money. And if I'm recalling the
Yes.
data correctly, I think over 90% of those dollars went to
Hmm.
Black owned businesses, and
Hmm.
70% of those businesses were women owned businesses. So it showed
Yes.
you that women were really out there doing a lot. I mean, by nature, we are creators, we are nurturers. We
Yes.
will create something if there's a need, and we'll figure it out. We'll create new products just because a kid was sick, and now we got something that's
Yes.
booming. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of women had to be home. They had to figure out something to do. A lot of them didn't go back to work, which I do understand because if I didn't have to, I would. But I got kids, and I love going to work because they drive me crazy, and I love them to death. But
We're in the same boat, but you know
I
that.
mean, I need somebody to get in the business of being wives. I just need someone to come home to that has my food cooked, the kids taken care of. If somebody wants to start a wife business, please sign me up first. Is the Wives Incorporated, please.
Wives Incorporated. I love it.
I used to
Yes.
always say when I was married, I need a wife. Oh my God. But
Yeah.
back to access to capital. Then the access to capital, I don't think that's ever changed for our businesses. So the program that we did with List was one good example of it. We did another program called PPP Prep, which was actually a
Yeah.
model we learned through NLC out of Philly, and we were able to take that application, put it over our technology, and turned it around in 10 days. So by the round three of PPP, in round three they started changing the rules. They allowed for sole
Yeah.
proprietors. They did so much different things. Um, it was perfect timing for us to launch the program. We partnered with two organizations, Prospect Business Association and the Heartland Black Chamber. We had support from UMB, Kaufman, KC SourceLink, the EDC Kansas City that gave financial support. How that program worked was very simple. BizCare had the online platform. People would go and sign up through that. My partners would pick it up, and the partners would actually follow up with each individual request. For those who were ready to go, they sat down with them for a minimum of 2 hours with an accountant who we paid to help them with the application for PPP. Because it was pretty universal. And if you had everything
Yeah.
and you got it in, it was almost a guarantee as long as funding was available. And so we pushed
Right.
that program through. I don't have the data to say how many were women and how many were not, but I know that a women owned business did get the most funding out of it. But with that program alone, I think we were close now. I think we're tipping over $2.5 million in SBA and local relief. So if we couldn't get you access to SBA, we found local dollars like the program we had with List through Central City or any other grants that were available, the SAFE grants that were going on through the health department and Community Capital Fund.
Right.
Whatever was out there, we tried to grab it for them and help them get access to it. So that was really successful. We just got word, and I don't know if I can announce it yet, but Kaufman coming through again with the funds. Kaufman
Yeah.
and shout out to Shakia Webb really
Okay.
helped us and got us $250,000 to continue that program so that we can continue to buy. It's pretty much application prep with our small businesses that are looking to go after capital. To complement that program, what I am in the works of doing, and again, shout out to Councilwoman Park Shaw, who we've been working closely with. She's really been on this about helping small businesses and helping us to champion this. During maybe the last fiscal year, our fiscal year runs April to May. So this last fiscal year budget approval, and thank you to the small business community and advocacy group that came out and shut down the last what was it, the budget session. They shut it down. I wasn't even
Right.
around. They was like, my boss called me, said they was calling your name, and I was like, I was not in cahoots on that, but yo, that is awesome. It's great to have trust and
Yeah,
support from the community. But because of
it
them,
is.
we were able to get council to set aside a $500,000 out of the federal relief funds. And what I'm
Oh, wow.
planning to do with that is to take that $500,000 and partner it up, so that we can put out grants for our small businesses and our ESOs. We hope that we can leverage
Yes.
that money to raise private capital and start a new fund or a capital fund that will be the cheapest on the streets, which will be below 4%, and then create eligibility for 0% interest for our businesses. Because it's money we're putting on the table as a city, we get to say how it gets, spent, what the requirements are for them to get it. We can make it accessible. And so I realized the challenges, especially through the pandemic, for our businesses, women, anybody, businesses of color, particularly those women of color, how hard it is for them to access capital, particularly through our banks. Because
Yes.
at the end of the day, unless the banks change their requirements or their processes, their regulatory process, we can't really get what we need out of them to do to really create access for our businesses. So what can I do to help them get to the point to where they are bankable, putting money in their hands and helping them to set it up in a way where it's accessible, it's affordable, so that they can actually pay it back and not be upside down. And so right now, a lot of our businesses, because of the pandemic, are upside down. And I'm just trying to find easier ways for them to do that. I think there are going to be other capital programs that might be coming out for women, Black, Brown businesses, however it may be, LMI, low to moderate income. I think
Yeah.
there are some talks about how to get more capital in the streets. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted on that. But if you are ever just looking for capital and just want to know what's out there, if we know of any programs, I usually post it on our social media: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, the KC BizCare office, or you can go to our website, bizcare.kcmo.gov. We have a whole page for grants and loans. So as we know about different things, especially if they're a little bit long term, and even if they're national, but if they impact Kansas City businesses, I will put it there, or I will put it on our social media and immediately get that out to our partners for our businesses to access. So we're trying every way we can, but this is a part of the ecosystem building process: capital, finance,
Yeah.
access. How do I, again, as a city, these are things that we could be doing in policies and programs and initiatives to make it easier. And so I can't give too many details about it because it's still in the works and I still have to get
Of
approval.
course.
But just know that our office is actively working on a new capital fund for our small businesses, and outside of that, giving you that technical support to be able to access those capital funds are is one we have funding for, but we're definitely trying to get all the pieces together for it. I say
So those are great
that.
resources. Any other resources other than what you said that you want to like do a brief shout out to? I do love that you plugged you guys' website and social media, and those are so important to follow. If you don't mind saying it again, your social media handles, so we can emphasize that.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this to stop binging. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh, it's
I'm
okay.
closing. Yeah, I'm closing my email, so
We
it'll
all
stop.
being.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's picking it up.
I've had a couple.
Okay, so
It's all good.
bizcare.kcmo.gov, bizcare.kcmo.gov. Again, all our social media links are on our website as well. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, is where we will try to post more things. I'm trying to get more communication support so we can begin to put more information out there on a regular basis. I got a small team, and so we kind of get combated with people first, and then we'll try to get the communications
Yeah.
out. But that's where people can go on the grants and loan page. If you scroll down through the page, you'll see it. There'll be a bunch of boxes, but that's where you can go to just to kind of see some of the things that are out there. But we're actually getting ready to do a website revamp, so we'll probably have newer resources. But there might be older stuff on there, but it's more so, for example, to kind of show people, hey, here's what we have, here's what we're trying to do. So if I get any more partners that have unique type of programs, not just their regular products and programs, unique programs for women, for businesses of color, anything like that, I try to post that there. And then I'm trying to work with more, get more partners to help with the financial support and education and things of that sort that we can refer businesses to.
Dope, dope. Okay, two more questions and then we can wrap up
Okay.
in our wrapping up. All right. So, access to capital, entrepreneurs, the city of entrepreneurs. This is where we're
Yeah.
going. The whole end goal is to build wealth, right?
Yes.
That generational wealth, that life sustaining wealth that we are able to give our kids 150K to 200K to put down on their down payment for their homes. Talk to us about your vision for wealth in Kansas City and whether that's the region or your block or wherever. Just talk to us a little bit about why why is wealth such a huge important aspect of being an entrepreneur and that freedom from that wealth. um, so that's my first
Mm-hmm.
question, closing question.
Okay.
The second closing question is if you could talk to us a little bit about your South Africa trip. But yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when you look at the different things that plight, and because we're both Black women, I'm gonna speak on that. Um,
Yes.
when you look at the plight of Black people in America, hell, if you look at the plight of Black people all over the world, it comes down to one
Yeah.
thing: access to wealth. Um, it was ironic, and I'm gonna mix in a little bit of the South Africa trip. It's ironic how in South Africa we are the majority, but we have the least
Yes.
access to anything. And it almost, just a little bit, almost made me appreciate being in America, where we might still be the minority, but we actually had more access to things. We had a little bit
Hmm.
more wealth than our than the because we're the diaspora, than our ancestors, our people we might be connected to in Africa. And so it
For
was an
sure.
interesting thing to see, because this was the first time I had visited Africa for work and really had to kind of focus on just work and just observing what's happening. What does their ecosystem look like? How are they generating wealth? What are the gaps? What are the things that they're doing well that we're not? Um,
Yeah.
and so, generating wealth is a big deal, but I also know personally how having our own wealth can take your family a long way. I'm comfortable now, but growing up, I didn't realize how uncomfortable we were as a family because my parents never showed us.
Yeah.
But because of my father's business, and it wasn't always great every year, it
Of
gave us
course.
access. So the first time I visited Africa was in West Africa. I think it was like Senegal, Dakar, Ghana,
Hmm.
Ivory Coast. I was probably about the same age as my children, 7, 10 years old,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
seeing those different things. But without my father having his own business and paying himself, I'm sure he would not have made that on a regular paycheck.
Hmm.
But part of the reason why he jumped off and started his business, because he hit a ceiling, and he knew as a Black man he could only go so far. And then to go in and start your business and then look up some 20, 30 years later, and the same person you came in with is now the CEO of the company you started with, and you're already a CEO of your own company, is very interesting, and it shows you the difference between white and Black, and how we move through and
Yeah.
get up to the C suite. So now going back to
Yeah.
South Africa, again, we're the majority. I don't think there's any Black people in C suites. And if
Mm.
there are, they're very few. And I think the only time we were able to see any openings of that, when we were reading like a Forbes Africa, we saw finance. Now there were women of color, but there weren't a lot of us that were present or represented. But there was some momentum moving. Now you come back to America, there are women represented. Are they always Black? Are they always brown? No. Um,
Right.
so even when it comes to just the discussion of women, we also have to go deeper in there and say, okay, well, what's the difference between white and Black and brown? There's still a gap,
Mm.
even when you talk about just gender by itself. Um,
Mhm.
so when it comes to wealth And why is that important to entrepreneurship? Why is that important to me as an individual and family? Again, it's because I know what it can do for a family. In fact,
Yeah.
what I've learned, none of my parents are transitioning over and they ain't dying, but they made sure one of the things that they did with us is, we had these family meetings and we would sit down. They started a family trust. So now with this family
Oh,
trust, what we can do, what they pretty
yes.
much did, they created a family bank. Now my
Yeah.
family, my direct descendants, my sister's direct descendants, my god brother's direct descendants, because he was adopted into our family, they will all have access to this fund that, we're taking all the insurance and anything that we have that are wealth based will dump into this fund. Our assets, maybe our homes, our cars, it will dump into this fund and we will be able to bank ourselves. So now I can pull from this for a loan for a car, a house, to start a business. I don't have to worry
Yes.
about interest rates. I don't have to worry about being denied unless the family that be says, "Nah, you're not good at paying nothing back." So it's there's a different dynamic, and I wish I knew this sooner because I would have been trying to put things, and I'm still trying to do that, to get that financial education and showing people how you can build certain things, you can build wealth, and it doesn't always have to be with the money that you have in hand. It could be from different things that you're setting up, like your insurance, your life insurance, all these different
Yeah.
things. And now, as a family, we have a place to go outside of the bank to bank ourselves. And that's going to
Yeah.
take us a long, long way. I've been a homeowner since 2007. I was 24 years old, 23, 24 years old the first time I owned a home. I was a single mom, and I've owned that home since then. My house has doubled in value because of gentrification that's happened around the neighborhood that I'm in. And I was like, well, let me go ahead and get this renovation loan. Now I've doubled the value of my home through the renovations that I've made, but it's an asset that I can now keep it to my family for anybody else to kind of take on. Same for my
Yeah.
parents' home, things of that sort. So it's very important because it helps us as individuals, it helps us as a culture, to
Yeah.
think differently, act differently. But if we had more wealth, a lot of things would change. Education, crime,
Mhm.
all those things are impacted or a root of the illness of lack to wealth. And then you can go on
Yes.
to the systematic racism that keeps us from
Yes.
accessing wealth. So there's so many angles or ways you can kind of hit it. But the simple answer for me is entrepreneurship. Nobody can stop you. You can do whatever you want. You can be as creative as you want. And now with the game of social media, anybody's a celebrity. You can do simple things. You can do dumb things, and you can make it.
Oh man, that is the perfect end to a perfect conversation about um, Kansas City just being the city of entrepreneurs, National Women's Small Business Month, um, being a black or brown business owner, being a black or brown woman led business,
Mhm.
all of that in one auspice. You, my friend, have given us so much information. And to end it on wealth building and why we are even going. Um, why we should even do entrepreneur or be an entrepreneur and why we should even put all of our eggs and trust in ourselves. Thank you so much for being an advocate for us. Thank you so much for all that you're doing on behalf of your community that look like you, on behalf of the community that doesn't look like you. We just thank you, Nia, for everything and setting up this ecosystem and being so integral in this ecosystem. And I have I have no words for what's about to happen in this city because of you and at the auspice of your care. So we thank you, Nia.
Oh,
And
thank
thank
you
you
so
for
much.
spending your time with
Of
us.
course.
All right, community wise, and that was it. We will see you next month.
Thank you guys.